It's Saturday morning cartoons, and we've got a audio visual here. Now, this isn't the one I made myself, which is tucked safely away, but this is uh, a copy in wax, and I believe it is beeswax too, of the Siglum Dei Ameth, the famous diagram from Enochian Magick of Dr. John Dee and Edward Kelly. We're going to talk just a little bit about Enochian Magick in its original form, from the 1580s, to how it has developed in modern times, and we're just going to talk a little bit about it, not very much and not very long. And I apologize for starting early today, but at 11 o'clock my time, I will be presenting virtually at ThelimaCon. And I'll also be doing it tomorrow at the same time. So Sunday school may be about 15 minutes early tomorrow too, so I can prepare for my my presentation tomorrow for ThelimaCon. So that's that. Okay, I'm going to be reading from this book here, Enochian Vision Magick, a practical guide to the magic of Dr. John Dee and Edward Kelly. And it'll be probably a short little talk today, as I mentioned. Now, but I've got a few audio visuals here or visuals. So this is the preface to the 2019 edition, which is this one. Whenever I visit London, I never fail to make a pilgrimage to the temple of history that is the British Museum. In my opinion, it is holy ground, a time machine, a vortex of human consciousness, and the material showcase of the Akashic records. I love it all, especially the endless low-ceiling catacombs of the basement. I got to digress for a second here. And I probably told you this story in other contexts before, but Constance and I, years ago, were touring all by ourselves in the basement of the British Museum, and it's not off limits, or at least it wasn't at the time. And there's like low ceilings, okay, and most of the collection of the British Museum is in the basement, exhibited right out in front. You could sit on the statues if you wanted, and there's I didn't see one docent or guard or anything down there. We were just down there all by ourselves, just as far as the eye can see, rows and rows and rows of priceless statuary and stuff. And we were in the antiquities section, Greek antiquities section. And there were all these small little statues of Pan. And you'd look down at the little card that said what they were, and they are so ancient, 500 BC, 600 BC, and older. And I had sort of bent over to squint to read one of these little cards on one of the statues of Pan. And then I sort of backed up a little to get a better look at the Pan, because it was created, it was chiseled so long ago that the god Pan was still in the living pantheon of the people that carved it. That was Pan himself, you know. And when I backed up, I felt something really hard bump into my ass, okay? And I had backed into another exhibit. And I turned around, and it was a seated Demeter. So almost life-size seated Demeter with a holding up that double torch, and it looked so familiar. And then I recognized it as from an illustration that is included in Manly Palmer Hall's Secret Teachings of All the Ages. And I said, Constance, come here and look. It's just like that. It's Demeter. I was goosed by Demeter. And I said, this is just like that image in the Manly Palmer Hall big book. And then I look at the card, and it is Demeter from the temple of Demeter in, I forget the Greek location. But it was just so awesome. And the British Museum, I was lucky enough when I stayed almost a month in London a few years back to have a flat just within 3 or 4 blocks of the British Museum, and I got to visit the British Museum every day of my visit. It was, well, anyway, but I digress. Let's see. I love it, especially the endless low-ceiling catacombs of the basement. I'm particularly drawn to the Greek and Roman antiquities. The Babylonian and Assyrian exhibits are so monumentally awe-inspiring, they haunt my dreams for months after my visits. But as much as I'm drawn to the ancient stuff, I linger longest gazing upon a modest collection of articles from the more recent Elizabethan period of English history, and that's Elizabeth I I'm talking about. An elaborately inscribed wax disc about 9 inches in diameter, and I think this is probably a very faithful replica of that, and it looks pretty much like this, only it's seated seated flat. As a matter of fact, I've got just a black and white picture of the exhibit as pretty much it was last time I visited. It's in a case of its own now. There's John Dee and Edward Kelly's smoky crystal scrying crystal. There is the golden talisman, which looks like that, only it's gold. It looks gorgeous. It's highly polished. And there's the sigillum. And then there's several small versions of the sigillum. Those are the ones that sat under the table legs of the Holy Table. There's supposedly John Dee's black obsidian mirror and the case for it. So much for the cartoons. An elaborately inscribed wax disc about 9 inches in diameter and several smaller versions of the same. A beautiful gold medallion about 3 inches in diameter and a black obsidian mirror mounted in an upholstered carrying case. In the mid-1980s, when I first came upon them, they were identified simply as magical objects of Dr. John Dee, circa 1583. and they were tucked inconspicuously among furnishings and small household items of the period. I mean, it's right by Elizabethan teacups, okay? In the years that followed, the collection moved several times, each time to more conspicuous displays. The articles are now rest in a prominent display case of their own in the center of the first floor gallery. It's called the King's Gallery, I think it's called. It seems that interest in John Dee and his celebrated status as a mathematician, international spy for Queen Elizabeth I, and model for Shakespeare's Prospero, has grown in the past 30 years. The items, which should be familiar to anyone who's even remotely interested in Enochian magic, are key elements and souvenirs of the most amazing magical adventure ever recorded. A beeswax siglum diamet, the design of which displays in figures and letters an angelic hierarchy of heaven. The golden talisman, the design of which is the graphic index of the Great Table, home to an angelic chain of command that forms the structure of existence itself. Now I'm just going to briefly show you what I mean by that. If you're familiar with modern Enochian magic with the use of 4 elemental tablets joined together by a tablet of union, those elemental tablets have a hierarchy of angels in them. There's 4 quadrants, and in those 4 quadrants are God names, and then a hierarchy of angels. That structure that would eventually evolve, manifest, develop into the Enochian elemental magic that is so popular today, with the hierarchy of God names of the whole tablet, and then the cherubs and the different hierarchy of spirits, all came from this diagram here. Now, if you would look at each one of these, you sort of read the things from the center outward. You see, believe it or not, it is outlining that hierarchy for every one of those elemental tablets. Okay, who rules who, how many? See, there's the God name, and then the 3 divine names, Mor, Dael, Hektika. Then there's a new hierarchy for every one of the sub-angles of each, and there is that little configuration of crosses right there, shows the Grand Cross and the 4 subdivisions of each of the elemental tablets. It's all here. It's all really cool. North, south, east, and west. But I digress. And a black obsidian magic mirror that served as Dee and Kelly's angelic viewing screen for nearly 3 years of meticulously recorded magical visions. I sometimes wonder if John Dee and Edward Kelly ever gazed into that dark mirror and peered 400 years into the future. A future when their audacious efforts to tap the mind of God and communicate with angels would be studied, debated, analyzed, and imitated by magicians and spiritual adventurers the world over. A future time when their attempts to directly assail the gates of heaven would be seriously examined, not as naive and superstitious Bible-inspired pretensions, but as serious psychodramatic techniques to access and exploit quantum levels of human consciousness. My own interest in Enochian magic began in the mid-1970s by studying how the 19th century magicians of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and later Aleister Crowley, applied parts of Dee and Kelly's system of angelic magic to their efforts to synthesize the various Hermetic sciences and create a sort of practical, universal field theory of Western occultism. My growing passion for the study was fortuitously well-timed because scholarship on the subject was just starting to blossom around the world, and material that had slumbered in museum libraries, untouched, unanalyzed, and unpublished for 4 centuries, suddenly became publicly accessible. Special acknowledgement and praise should be made to Enochian Magic pioneers Jeffrey James, Joseph Peterson, Clay Holden, Robert Turner, Adam McLean, Jim Reeds, and Colin Wilson. It soon became clear to all of us studying the original 16th century documents that Enochian magic, as practiced by the Golden Dawn and Aleister Crowley, while being brilliantly exploited and developed, had only scratched the surface and tapped a tiny portion of the potential the system offered. The first edition of Enochian Vision Magic, that's the first edition of this book, was my modest attempt to paint in very broad strokes a bigger picture of the circumstances of the reception of the material and the possible practical implications the technology could have for the modern spiritual explorer. Magic is a fascinating study. It's colorful, historic, dramatic, scary, and titillating. It's fun to read about magic and become a magic trivia expert. But the scholar focuses on the subject. The magician focuses on the magician. And magic, in practice, is more than an intellectual mastery of a colorful subject. Like yoga or Zen or Sufism, magic is a powerful self-transformational art form, capable of triggering profound changes in the consciousness of the practitioner. Since 1978, my wife Constance and I have hosted Monday night magic class in our home in Costa Mesa. Wow, those were the days. But I digress. We regularly schedule a series of workshops on Enochian magic practiced in a group setting. And year after year, the system itself teaches us more and more about itself. In fact, tonight our living room will fill with a score of Enochianauts who will begin the evening by sharing the results of their visionary homework assignments. And then together we will, as a group, penetrate the magical universe with a particular Enochian angelic intelligence. Everyone's vision, at least those who stay awake, will differ in many details, but most, if not all, will share an uncanny parallel in the fundamental themes of their visions. Imagine if a botanist and a musician and a stonemason and a folklorist all went together on a tour of Ireland. The botanist's consciousness would be altered and elevated by the mystical auras of the flora. The musician would be transcendently crazed by the lively music at the pubs. The stonemason inspired by the geologic and technical wonders of the stone architecture, and the folklorist might be captured by leprechauns. But they would all agree they were in Ireland. It's been 11 years since Enochian Vision Magic was first published, and at that time I had the privilege to lecture around the world on the subject, and was even invited to present an all-day workshop in Krakow, Poland at the Stary Hotel, reportedly the residence where Dee and Kelly lived and performed many of their angelic workings in the 1580s. These workshops were not simply lectures on the history of Enochian magic. The attendees became Enochian visionary magicians themselves and joined me in a group scrying session of one of the 30 Enochian Aethers. So far as I know, everyone has lived through the experience, and I'm happy to report that quite a few of them have gone on to incorporate Enochian magic and practices into their personal magical arsenal of tools. And that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Obviously, Monday night class has been on hold since the pandemic, and we have since even moved from Costa Mesa. But anyway, that's where I wanted to leave it today for Sunday morning or Saturday cartoons. And right now, I have to get myself all psyched up and prepared for my presentation, and I log on in just a few minutes. If I hope many of you are already registered for the event. It's going on right now and tomorrow. My thing will be at 2 o'clock Eastern or 11 o'clock here. But anyway, I'll be on probably about 15 minutes early tomorrow for Sunday school. Until then, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.